Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Honest HR Nitrous. I am Bill, the company's expert. Thank you for joining me today. This is the live Q&A we do at least a couple of times a week where we talk about job search. So if you are between jobs, if you are looking to get promoted, if you are looking to change careers or anything like that, this is for you. This is an interactive live stream. So if you're seeing my beautiful face right now, you should see a chat box somewhere in the vicinity of my face. Get in the chat box. If you are a subscriber to my channel, you should be able to ask me questions. Let me know what you're struggling with. Let me know what you're wondering about, and I will do my best to help you out. That's what this is all about. The title of today's episode is When the Job Search Feels Like a Game You'll Never Win. And this is episode number 63. So we're going to talk about that for sure. And if you are feeling that right now, then get in the chat and let me know and we can talk about it. As always, a shout out goes out to my YouTube channel members, to my Patreons, my super thanks donors, and of course to you, my participants. Thank you for being here. I do not have an agenda. I do not have anything to monologue or to talk about. I'm simply responding to your questions. So that's why I need people to send me some questions, just like Survivor C, who is here, who says hi, right? That's awesome. Hi, Survivor C. Thank you for being here. Hopefully you're going to get something out of this. Let me know what you're looking to get out of this. If you're wondering about something. Survivor C, here we go. Survivor C says, I'm over 55, was out of the workforce, went through a divorce, and now having to start over. Well, on the one hand, I'm sorry to hear that, Survivor C. On the other hand, congratulations. It's never too late for a new beginning. You know, this is the time to do things right. You can do it. You can take everything you've learned and you can use it this time around to have things go the right way. So there's nothing to worry about. And I applaud your strength and your ability to do this. That's awesome. So way to go. I see good things in your future. If you have a specific thing you're struggling with, please let me know and I'll do my best to speak to that. Yeah, like I said here, the title is When the Job Search Feels Like a Game You'll Never Win. Yes, and I just want to say that this whole job search thing is, if you're engaged in it right now and you're trying to get a job and, you're finding this process very depressing and confusing and stupid and annoying, you're not alone because it is inherently depressing and stupid and confusing. It's especially confusing these days because there's some change happening. Most things stay the same, okay? There's a little bit of change. For example, we've got AI here and it's affecting a few things. Nothing earth-shattering, but unless you happen to be one of the people that it's displaced in the workplace, then of course it's a big deal. But in the grand scheme of things, it's just another tool that we have at our disposal. And, disruptive tools like this bring disruption and change. So that's the thing. The other thing is that, it really seems to me, just from my perspective, is that the posted job market gets stupider and stupider every year. And I'm still kind of surprised that most people are not taught about networking or about the hidden job market or any of that stuff like in school. Like I think they should be. If you learn a bit about people and how you reach out to people and stuff like that, I mean, that really, really helps. And the proof of the pudding is, you may have a family member, you may know someone, most people do, that they got their job by reaching out to somebody. You know what I mean? It's more common to get a job that way than through applying to internet job postings. So that's just the reality. So I encourage everyone to learn about this. It is to your advantage. It is the solution to many problems to learn about those methods of getting a job. But we're here today to talk about everything. So, regardless of your situation, I'm here to try and help you out. Survivor C was here, and then their post disappeared. So I don't know if that's a good sign or not, but oh, here we go. So there's a new post. Survivor C says, "I love your videos." Well, thank you, Survivor C. I'm glad they're useful. I never had a career, but I'm great with customer service. Built direct selling businesses successfully. Got my life and health insurance license last year, but the 100% commission. I'm not sure what that is. That sounds like an American thing, like health insurance. That's like an American thing. So I don't know the details of how that works, but it sounds like you're doing okay. And if you don't have a career, don't feel too badly about that. You're not alone. And I think that most people don't have a career in the sense that they have a linear progression in one industry, in one career path. So that's the deal. Don't worry about that too much. But it's good that you have a sort of area that you kind of specialize in, it seems. So that's really awesome. Get in the chat. Let me know what you guys' questions are, what you're wondering. I'm here to answer questions. No, this process is very confusing. And one of the reasons why it's confusing is nobody ever teaches people how to get jobs, And when they do, at least what I've seen, okay, they do kind of two things. They acknowledge that the way that people get jobs is networking. It always has been, and it probably always will be. But then they don't really go into that. And instead, they talk about, dealing with recruiters for posted jobs, which is fine. But that's not the only thing. And it's not even the main thing. So it's just very surprising to me why people don't teach that more. Internet Vibe says, were you always a manager or were you also a recruiter? I was never a recruiter. I have dealt with recruiters, just like anybody else, to get a job in my early career. And in my later career, I have been running businesses, and that includes the HR function. So I've hired recruiting firms, and I've worked with recruiters to hire people. So I've experienced sort of it from the both sides of the table. And one thing I've done is I've gone, for what it's worth, is I've gone back to university because I was asked to, and I've taught in business programs, and I taught a lot of the HR courses, including recruitment and selection. So I've taught those courses, and I've taught recruiters. It really isn't rocket science. It's interesting because HR it's pretty much the area of business with the most uncertainty. It's also coincidentally the most, I'm going to say it, the most inefficient. Now, I don't mean that HR itself is inefficient, but I mean the workforce, in terms of information flow and collaboration and all that. It's the most inefficient of all the different departments. Okay. Like sales is more predictable than HR. You know what I mean? And this is evidenced by the fact that, in this day and age, there's been a trend actually happening for several decades. We've been on this downward trend where people are staying for less and less time on average at every job. They're moving around more and more. So that means the stay time or the dwell time, whatever you want to call it, at any particular job is going down, So that's how good of a job we're doing. We can't get people to stay anymore. So that's brought in some changes, with it, where we don't want to train people. We don't want to take care of them because they'll be gone pretty soon. That's kind of, how it's going. So HR has the most to gain. And one of the things I observed working with recruiters and teaching recruiters was that, a lot of the theories behind like job interview questions and things like this, to me, it really is regarded as pseudoscience. Like it's not proven. They're not scientific. They're not all scientific principles that have been proven. A lot of them have been disproven, and a lot of others yet don't have any data either way. And they seem kind of hokey, So that's why I have a bit of a chip on my shoulder with HR. I think there's the most to gain there for people who know how to do it right. And I have a chip on my shoulder also because in my early career, I dealt with a lot of idiot recruiters. I'm sure most of you guys have too. that, really kind of marked me on my opinions of recruiters. So that informed me when I learned more about the theory behind it and managing recruiters and stuff. So that's kind of my background on it. But no, I'm a business leader. I'm a former CEO. I have an MBA, and I've taught recruiters in universities. So that's why I speak to it. Also, there's just more demand out on the internet for talking about this stuff than like how to grow businesses and stuff like that. So, I consult on how to grow businesses because that's my core competency, and then I talk about this stuff, and I share my experiences dealing with this stuff because that's what people want to hear. Does that make sense? Amazed says, hi, any thoughts on applying for a low-level role while already interviewing for a senior level position within the same company but on a different team? Both opportunities seem like great prospects. Yeah, that's tricky. I mean, you would want to keep those as separate as possible, right? So hopefully, there is no people in common between those two roles. It's not like you're going to the same recruiter or something like that. You know what I mean? That can be kind of tricky because the obvious thing is they're looking for what they call fit. And one part of what they mean by that is what level you're at, what skills you have. And the theory that they have, this is like recruiters. They believe, we're just talking about recruiters and their theories. The theory that they have is that you can only operate at one level, the level at which you're qualified, right? You can't work at a lower level because of the whole overqualified thing, because the assumption that if you work at a lower level, A, it will compensate you less, so you'll get less money. And B, the assumption that if they pay you less, then you won't want to stay there. It'll only be like a temporary thing while you look for something better and find it, right? That's the assumptions they're making about you. Okay, now, with some people, those will be correct, but with a lot of others, those will be wrong. They might be wrong for you. I know a lot of people that are capable of working at a higher level, and maybe they've done it, but they found it very stressful, very demanding, and not fun, and they kind of burned out a little. So even though they've been up here, they would actually rather stay at this level. They feel like, no, this is not as intense. It might pay a little less, but I'm more comfortable here. I'm more content here. This is where I want to be, right? But in the eyes of a recruiter, that doesn't happen because you either belong at this level and you're not qualified for this, or you belong here and you're overqualified for this, in which and we shouldn't give this to you because you'll just leave. You won't want to really be there, even though you say you do. That's the assumptions they're making. So that's why you don't want to inform them that you're looking at both positions at once, because that will not be consistent with these beliefs, this like ideology that they share. And that's the other thing I don't like about them. They make a lot of generalizations about people, and I understand why. It's because they're dealing with a volume of people and it's all based on probabilities. But still, when you're dealing with a workforce, there is a part of HR that deals with individuals, right? Some part of HR, they're schizophrenic. Sometimes they regard people as numbers, right? Like kind of like an example of which I've just stated, right? But other times they regard people as individuals. That's when you get like sort of, harassment, counseling, and, communication training and all that kind of stuff. You're dealing with individuals. And human resources is very schizophrenic. It can't make its mind up as to how to regard an employee. Are they a number to be regarded with generalizations, or are they individuals that we need to tailor and customize our treatment of? They try and do both of these at once, and it just is very imperfect. Okay, so for that reason, I would not inform them. That's what I can say for a start. Then, if you can maintain it as independent as possible, hopefully you could separate it by time. Do one first and then the other instead of doing them simultaneously. You may not have control over that, but if you can, that would be perfect. If you have to do them at the same time, try and keep them separate, and don't mention the other job or the other like involvement. That would be my recommendation, because it will just muddy the waters. It'll cause a lot of weird, awkward questions to be asked, and there won't be good answers for them, because you're dealing with people that believe in a certain ideology, like you can only be qualified for one or the other, but not both, right? That's what I'd say about that. Caleb says, any advice on finding a job across the country when looking to relocate? I've been putting relocating on my resume, but it seems like I might not be getting interviews because I'm out of state. Thanks. Any advice on finding a job across the country when looking to relocate? But you've been doing that and they're turning you down because you're out of state? I would talk to a recruiter about that. I really don't know if there's anything you have to do there, apart from just saying willing to relocate, like, and having that on your cover letter. You may want to put it on your resume right at the bottom. I don't think there's any harm in that, to state that explicitly. Even if, like, look, for most people, you're probably willing to relocate if they made you like an offer you couldn't refuse. You know what I'm saying? You're not actively looking to relocate, but you'd be open to it if somebody offered you a dream job, for great pay, right? I think most people would relate to that, right? So if that's the situation you're in and you feel that you're being hurt because you're not like advertising the fact that you're open to relocation, I would just say I'm open to relocation, and I would put like maybe the scope, like not anywhere in the world, but like within the continental US or within North America, or, I'd just put like maybe a parameter like that. And just leave it at that. I mean, if you put that on your cover letter at the bottom, and you put that in your resume at the bottom, I don't think there's really anything more you would need to do for that. In fact, normally we see the opposite effect. We see the effect that, like, if they're deciding between a local candidate and, a distance candidate that's going to be relocating for it, a lot of times they'll actually regard the distance candidate as better for some weird psychological reason. I think the idea is that, like, oh, if you're local, then, you can't be that good. If you're coming from, across the country or something, then you must be good, because we're now like looking at the entire country, and we're looking at the candidates over the entire country, and we're bringing in this person. It's almost like they're more exotic, It's like we had to bring this person all the way from, X. So that kind of psychologically, it almost implies that they're like better than like what you could just find in your own, backyard kind of thing. You know what I mean? So I think that just putting that on your resume and cover letter is good. That's plenty, Now, any advice on finding a job across the country when you're looking to relocate? I mean, that you'd have to do a targeted outreach, right? I have a video in the description box called How Successful People Find Jobs. Check out that video. There's a link to it in the description box under this live stream. It's a video of mine. Okay, How Successful People Get Jobs. Check that out. And that might give you some ideas on how to do that. The only difference is that you're going to be looking at a different city, not your hometown, like I did in the example. Amaze says, thanks for answering my question, Bill. Both roles are highly competitive, and I hope I've played safe. Yeah, I wish you all the best with that, Amazed. I know it's silly. Like, navigating some of these HR things is just silly. Like, that's yet another example of like a stupid thing that I believe HR does, an assumption they make, which is often not true. It is true sometimes, but certainly not universally. The problem is that they apply this assumption to everybody. They don't investigate to see if that applies to you, or just to see if there's any hints of that. No, they just assume it for everyone and act like that's the only way people could possibly behave. That's my beef with them. Okay, it's very poor reasoning. Mona says, I was denied a job for asking high job compensation based on my worth. What is the art of negotiation? Okay, so the way it works, Mona, is you can't negotiate until they first of all decided they want you, right? You see, if they're still talking to 6 other people, right? And you say, well, I need this much money, because I'm good. It's like they don't know you really at that point. And so what they're going to do is they're going to behave exactly the way you would behave when you go to the store, right? If you're going to the store, now just bear with me in this silly little, simile here. If you go to the store and you're wanting to buy, I don't know, you go to the produce section of the grocery store and you want to buy a cabbage, okay? Don't ask why, you just want a cabbage, right? That's for the sake of this example, right? Now, you can see before you there are 6 different types of cabbage, right? And they each have different qualities, right? You're not an expert on cabbage. These cabbages are all kind of different sizes, they look slightly different, but they have different prices, right? Now, if you don't know anything about cabbage, you don't really know, you haven't had a lot of experience with all these different types of cabbages, right? You just want cabbage, right? So what are you going to do? You're going to look at the cheapest one, right? Now, unless there's a real red flag with the cheapest one, it looks really crappy and disgusting, you're probably going to go with the cheapest one, right? Because to you, they're all the same. Now, that's kind of what's going on in a job interview when they bring in their bunch of candidates, right? Certainly for a first job interview. Sometimes if there's more than one interview in the process, it may vary, but generally they bring in people, they don't know them. They're getting a first impression of them, and it's really kind of hard to see who they really are, right? Some people, there's obvious red flags. They come in with an attitude and they come in dressed in sweatpants and, they've got food stains all down their shirt and stuff. It's like, okay, you can kind of see there's some red flags there, right? But for most people, they all kind of look the same. They all kind of say the right things. They all seem pretty good, So how do you compare them? Well, the first question out of your mouth is, what are your salary expectations, right? One person says, I'm pretty easy. The next person says, oh, no, I must have this, right? So the way they think is they go, okay, well, I'm going to go with the cheaper one because they all seem fine to me, at this point. I really don't know them. So we're going to eliminate the more expensive ones right off the hop because the process of deciding is it's an elimination process. You start off with hundreds of applications sometimes, and then you whittle it down to one person that you offer the job to. Right? So it's about eliminating. So you've eliminated most people. You've brought a sort of subset of people in for an interview, right? And you're going to start, say you brought in usually the average is 6 to 8 people for most jobs. So, let's say you brought in 8 people that you're doing interviews with. You got to try and eliminate 7 of those people, right? Now, every person you brought in for the job on paper is qualified. They could do the job. There wouldn't be any point to bringing in someone that on paper can't do the job. They're not qualified for it because if you pick that person, you still can't hire them because they can't do the job, right? So everybody by definition who's brought in for an interview, on paper, they meet the minimum technical requirements of the job. What the job interview does, it's now you're deciding between them based on who they are, their personalities, their ambitions, their communication skills, their professionalism, that kind of stuff, right? Okay? That's what this game is down to. It's these people are all qualified to do it, but there's these tiny differences, right? That's what's going to determine who gets eliminated and who gets chosen, right? So if you go in there and the first thing out of your mouth is, I demand this much money, they're probably going to eliminate you outright without looking any closer at you, okay? What you want to do is you want to get to the point where they say, we pick you. We've talked to 8 people out of 800 applications, and we pick you. Here's the offer. And that's when you can negotiate. And the only reason you can negotiate is because at that point, if you were to throw it back in their face, it's painful. Maybe it's embarrassing for the recruiter who recommended you to the hiring manager. Recruiter says, I think you should go with this candidate. Hiring manager goes, okay, they seem fine, right? And then you throw it back at their face. They say, no, I need this much money. Sorry, right? At that point, it causes pain. They think they're done. Now you're saying, well, you have to go back and continue the process, and they don't like that, right? So they want you to accept the offer, right? So the thought of you walking away from an offer, now it's painful to them. So that's the first time you have some semblance of power in this process to demand something or request something. Okay, so that's the point where you negotiate. If you haven't gotten to the offer stage yet, then any discussion about salary or compensation or anything, you basically shut it down. So you say, oh, it's too early to tell. I don't know at this point. I would have to know more details. Like, for example, what are the benefits? You want me to put a dollar value on the salary? I mean, hello, what are the benefits? How much vacation do I get? Is this shift work? Is there travel involved? Is there remote work? Do I have to work holidays? Is it mandatory overtime? How many sick days do I get? Blah, 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 blah. It's a silly request for you to give them a number that you're going to stick to, right? So I've done a video on this question. It's got millions of views. It's called, what are your salary expectations? Best answer. Check that out. It'll give you a lot more details of how you actually answer and handle it. But that's the general approach to negotiation. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. Good question. Caleb says, interesting. Never thought about it that way. I'll check it out. This was... Okay, yeah, the relocation thing. Yeah, check out that video. A lot of people should check it out. That should be almost... If I could sort of force people to do something, I would make that video almost required viewing for my channel or my live streams. Because a lot of people are just ignorant of that stuff. You've never been taught that. You've never been introduced to it. This is a real thing, and it really opens a lot of doors. So check that out. It's a link in the description. It's a link to a video I did called How Successful People Get Jobs. Okay, Kate45. Do recruiters take time to check out personal websites listed on resumes? I'm a writer and was thinking of creating a website to post my top 8 writing samples. Is a website overkill? Good question, Kate45. I do not know the answer. I don't think there is an answer to that question. There isn't a universal, yes, it's worth it, or no, it isn't. Some people will, but most won't. The only time they would check it out, in my opinion, is when you're at a later stage of the interview process. Okay, you're down to the final 3 or something like that. I don't think most recruiters are going to check out a personal website when you're being selected for an initial screening interview. You know what I mean? I'm sure there's exceptions to that, but I think the general rule is that most won't. I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it's definitely good to have more stuff out there so people can see what you have. Make sure that the website looks good. Make sure that it does impress, because if it doesn't hit someone as wow, this is professional, this is big leagues, this person has a lot of great stuff on here. If it doesn't give that reaction, then there's almost no point. It can't just be a Joe ho-hum website where, yeah, technically you got some stuff on there, but it looks amateur. It has to be good, or don't do it at all. That's what I would recommend. It's not a thing where good enough is worth doing. It would be let's make this look fantastic, So if you can't do that, or you're unwilling to do that, then I would say don't bother. It might not be worth the effort just to have nobody go there, and then the few that do, they don't really get blown away by it. They're just saying, okay, great, there's more stuff there. You know what I mean? So I don't know if that's helpful, but that would be how I would regard that. Hopefully that makes sense. Eric Larson says, what are your thoughts in higher view style interview? I have no idea what that is. I keep hearing that name, so I don't know if it's the latest flavor of the month, stupid, thing to get low-level employees or something. Pre-recorded video interviews where candidates answer pre-recorded questions and record their responses, often using a webcam or a phone. Yeah, that's been around for about 30 years and it's never really caught on. So I don't know, maybe since COVID, that stuff might be catching on more. What are my thoughts about it? Well, considering that it's kind of the whole approach is really stupid. It's less work for recruiters. They want to. It's a new and exciting way of them sloughing off more work onto candidates, so they do even less. That's what it's accomplishing. Candidates resist that kind of stuff. They don't embrace it. They've always pushed back against this kind of thing. So the only time a candidate would do this is if there's like a really amazing job at the end of it, or what they perceive to be an amazing job at the end of it. So big corporations can maybe like force people to use stuff like this. I don't think a lot of smaller companies would be able to force people to do it, That's my thoughts on it for what that's worth. Because people hate filming themselves, That's just the reality. They'd much rather have a personal interaction with people. They realize that the reason why you're being asked to record it as a video is so that people can ignore it, They watch the first 10 seconds, nope, and then, they don't watch the rest, Right? It's just another example of like they would love to have everything convenient for them and not convenient for the candidate, right? Mona says, sorry, I did not make it clear. I worked for the clinic, okay, for 4 months, and they offered me a contract while others were getting paid more with less experience, okay? So what does that have to do with anything, Mona? It doesn't affect how you negotiate, okay? Now, the problem is when you work for a company and you stay for that compensation, what that's doing is that's signaling that that's how much you're worth because you're taking it. Like we can argue till the cows come home over how much somebody is worth, right? Like they'll have their own perspective. I'll have a perspective of what I think they're worth. Who's right? Well, at the end of the day, the only thing you can agree on is what's reality. Now, if that person has been working, they've stayed in a job for, say, 2 years where they were paid X, they haven't left. They've been getting paid X for 2 years and they've stayed there. Then we can agree that that person is worth X. You know what I mean? So the problem is it's the problem everybody has when they're asking for a promotion. If you turn around and you say to your boss, look, I know I've been here for a long time and I've been working for this amount of money, but you see, I'm actually worth a lot more than that, right? So you either pay me that amount of money that I want or I leave, right? That's the implication. So the problem is that, the problem is everybody believes they're worth more than they're being paid. Okay. Like they did studies on this. There's all kinds of studies where they ask people, how do you think, how much money do you think you're worth, or whatever. And, something like 90% of people, regardless of how they're performing, if they're overperformers, underperformers, they all believe universally, like 90% of them, that they should be paid more because they're worth more, right? Now, experienced bosses know this, okay? And experienced bosses generally have had a lot of employees come to them and use that line. Say, I feel I deserve more money, you need to pay me more money, or I walk, right? Now, I don't know what the numbers are, but something like 90% of the employees that say things like that, it's a bluff. They have no intention of leaving. They have no other jobs lined up. They haven't even checked to see if they could get an offer from somewhere else for more, right? So a lot of experienced managers know that if you just say no to that, no, sorry, it's not in the budget. I'd like to, but it's not in the budget, right? That employee will stay exactly where they are, right? Okay, so that's the problem with this, okay? They've learned that the best approach is to call the bluff and say, like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry to hear that you're leaving, because we can't pay you anymore. Unfortunately, it's just not in the budget. So goodbye, and what happens when they do that is that 90% of their employees, they're good employees, stay and work for the same amount of money, right? So So that's the problem. So if you've been working for that money and you turn around and say, well, I'm worth more, right? What's going on in the back of their minds is, well, it doesn't seem like you're worth more because you've been staying here all this time for that amount of money, right? There is no right or wrong way to value an employee. Every organization has their own unique perspective on how to do that. I used to teach a course in university called Total Compensation about how you pay people, and we barely scratched the surface in like one course. There is no right or wrong answer. Everybody's got their own perspective. So if these people believe that you're only worth this and they're unwilling to pay you more, right? And they're even willing for you to leave over that, okay? Maybe what you need to do is you need to go to a place where they believe that you're worth more, okay? Now, what doesn't hurt, okay, is if you believe that you're worth more, let's verify that. Go out and look for jobs and see if you can get another offer that pays you more. And that would be proof positive that you are indeed worth much more than they're paying you, okay? Now, if you do that, okay, you have the option of going back to your boss now and saying, look, I believe I'm worth more, and you have to either pay me more or I'm going to leave, okay? And if they say yes or if they say no, it doesn't matter because either way, you come out on top. If they say, no, we're not paying you more, then you leave and you take that better job where they are paying you what you're worth. If they say, you're absolutely right, you could have advanced the fact that I have another job. I'm not going to give you the details, but I have another job. They're willing to pay me that much, so can you match it? They say, listen, you're absolutely right. That was an oversight on our part. We are paying your coworkers more or whatever. You are indeed worth that much money. We don't want you to walk. So here is your pay rise, your raise. Okay. So whichever way it works out, you come out on top. Okay. So that's what I would do. If you believe you're worth more, go out and get another job offer that proves that, then no one can tell you you're not, right? It's not a matter of opinions. It's proof positive in writing, right? And then whichever way you slice this, whichever way it turns out, you're going to be doing fine. Okay. That would be my advice in that situation. Maybe you got a nice humanistic boss that they really like you and they'll just say yes, for humanistic reasons. Yes. You do the same job you do now, just I pay you more for it. I don't have to, but I will. It's the opposite of good business, but, I like you. I don't want you to leave. It might just be smart if I do this. Maybe you luck out and you have that. Hopefully you do. But if not, do the thing where you prove it. And by proving it to yourself, that I think will be good too. Let's see, where did I leave off here? So hopefully that makes sense, Mona. Eric Larson, I had one for a manager role, which the software was watching my eye movement, body language. Oh, that's lovely, isn't it? Yeah. Listen, I don't want to come across as like some kind of privileged, arrogant prick or something, but like I would almost not subject myself to that. That's like, you know what I mean? It's like, it almost feels like, why don't you just reach out your hand so they can stamp a barcode on it, while they're at it. It really feels like that. I think that I meant what I said. Like, this is yet another thing that, it's like a fever dream for recruiters. It gives recruiters what they would want ideally is they want to know every thought you think. They want to hook you up to machines so they can learn every thought you're thinking. They can probe your mind. They have access to all your personal information, all your confidential stuff. Like, that's what they want, right? To help them make a decision about which employee we should engage. That's what they want. And they try and push for it. They try and push more and more in that direction. We don't want to lift a finger. We don't want to have to do any work. We just want to know everything about the person automatically, right? And they're using technology to help them in this. And at some point, I think, just personally, I don't know if you guys agree, but I think that at some point, it just crosses that line into like, this is unreasonable. It's dehumanizing. You know what I mean? This is going too far. It's like, for example, someone last week told me, they had to take a polygraph test at their job interview. They're strapped into essentially a lie detector. And they had to agree to this. It's like, yeah, they would love to know everything about you, like Big Brother. Because they think that will help them to choose a better employee, right? That's what they think. And I can tell you that if you look at the performance of HR over the last 50 years, the more they know about you, it's not helping because their reasoning is off. Because their mind is filled with, like I was saying before, several theories that, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I've been able to find out, they're pseudoscience. They don't have good science to back up any of these theories, But yeah, that's the reasoning they're employing when selecting candidates, right? So it's like, at one point, how much do you want to go down this path when there's, for example, the whole hidden job market there lying open before you? You know what I mean? That's accessible through networking. Networking that a lot of introverts can do easily, because a lot of it you can do on social networking and stuff like that initially. It feels better. It feels like a referral. It's not as dehumanizing as this process. It's where also the better jobs are, and you have much less competition in getting them. So when you put all that together, why would you subject yourself to this crap? That's what I want to know. It comes a point where it's self-defeating. It doesn't make any more sense to keep going down this path. And I feel like we're reaching it with things like this. If they want you to take a polygraph, sorry, no dice. In my opinion, investigate the hidden job market, for God's sake. If they're wanting you to do this crap, you got to re-record all your videos and it's going to be looking at your eye movement and analyzing. It's like, screw off, Learn about the hidden job market. You know what I mean? It's so much more promising than this garbage. And at the end of the day, they use all that information to do what? To exploit you, to pay you absolute rock bottom compensation, and, to push you as hard as, work you as hard as they possibly can with no care for, investing in you as an employee. You know what I mean? So I really feel put in a bad position when I'm asked about this stuff. What do I think about it? Should you do it? I would say, look, I understand if you're desperate. Okay, I get that. But there's so much more promising things to do than subjecting yourself to this, in my opinion. Now, if you turn around and told me, I want to work at Google or something, and this is Google's hiring process, it's like, okay, well, then you got no choice. But I would still try the hidden job market. I tried going around this crap at Google with networking. I would do that before I subjected myself to this. That's just my personal opinion. Take that for, with a grain of salt. Okay. Valby says, wow, such amazingly good. Oh, thank you very much, Valby. That's very kind of you. You're welcome, Kate. That's great. I'm glad that is somewhat helpful. Eric says, I appreciate you taking your time to answer the question and the honesty. You're welcome, Eric. I mean, there wouldn't be much point of me doing this if I wasn't going to keep it real. Oh, by the way, that's why I'm a former CEO. I don't have to worry about holding back on almost anything because I'm never going back to representing a company or anything like that. I'm a consultant. I've decided a long time ago that's where my career is going. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to say any of this crap, really, And I think the other day I went into some pretty sensitive areas, like for business. It's like, and I was like, really, there's a little voice in my head saying, no, but yeah. So sometimes Joey Plays is here. It says, hi, Bill. Hey. You spelled my name with a lowercase b, buddy. That's saying something. Okay, how do you think hiring managers feel about a cocky / overconfident candidate, or should I approach with more humility? Well, if you have a cocky, overconfident hiring manager, they'll probably love you. If you have a totally humble, gentlemanly or ladylike hiring manager, they'll probably hate you, right? People tend to hire in their own image, especially when personality is concerned. That's what we see. There is no one right or wrong way. What I would recommend, like just as a sort of general rule, is have some confidence, but don't be arrogant. Okay? It's not bad to be proud of yourself and to be proud of your accomplishments. It's not bad to say why, you can add value and why you'd be a great candidate. Nothing wrong with any of that. But if you come across as arrogant, like if you cross the line into arrogance, it's like, well, you're never going to find another employee as good as me, stuff like that. It's a fine line, right? So just confidence is good. Just a little bit of confidence is good, but just try not to cross that line. It's kind of not really a fine line. It's more of a kind of a fuzzy kind of sort of border there into arrogance. Okay. But going in, like being totally, like if you take the humility thing to an extreme, that doesn't work either. Okay. Because I've gotten questions on these live streams where people are saying, I don't want to brag in a job interview. That would be bad. It's like, well, no, you kind of have to brag a little bit. You have to sell yourself, and they're humble to the point of like, they don't want to mention that they are good and they have real skills and they can do things. They regard that as like, oh no, I'm bragging, and bragging is bad. It's a bad quality. So this is the sales process. You're engaged in the sales process. You're selling yourself. You have to be able to say why you're awesome. You don't want to come across as a big prick, if you're a guy, or a biatch if you're a girl. But, you need to be able to have some confidence and say, like, I can do this. If you need this, I know how to do that. I can do it for you really quickly, and I can do it for you very reliably, And it's my ambition to work in a job where I get to do that for people because I'm good at it, That's what I'm looking for, Hopefully this is that situation. So practice makes perfect. Do some mock interviews, okay? Sometimes Joey plays. Do some mock interviews with a friend or family member and see how it feels to say different things. That will help prepare you, and you'll get your story down, and then you'll go into a job interview and you'll bang it off because it's just muscle memory, essentially. Mock interviews are how you get good at this stuff. You practice over and over. You first learn by yourself, like memorizing answers to questions. Then when you feel you have those down, you practice with somebody else. Get them to be the job interviewer. It's a pretend interview. They're the interviewer. They can either write the questions themselves, or you can give them a list of questions. They'll ask you, and you answer them as if you're in a real job interview. And if it feels awkward, that's good, because that simulates the actual interaction. Okay, so that's why you want to do this. And these types of questions will be answered as you go through that process. Do about 30 to 40 of these if you can, then you'll be a whiz. Kate45 says, what are your thoughts on companies who make candidates take personality tests? Is this the way of the future? No. I'm a big believer in the Myers-Briggs type indicator. I know that that's somewhat fallen from favor, but to be fair, I think it was very stupid what they did. You see, when it was like in the 70s and 80s and stuff, when that was in its heyday, it was what it was. It wasn't some be-all, end-all thing that describes if you're good at a job. It just says, like, are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? Do you tend to make decisions based more on mechanical thought, like, reasoning, or emotion? Like, what type of person are you? You know what I mean? It didn't make any mention of like whether you're good for a certain job or not. It just says, this is the type of person you are. This is how you think. This is how you react. This is how you take things, And when it was used for that, it was actually really, really good. When I was in charge of a company, I made everyone in the company take that test. And what it did is it yielded some pretty interesting results. Pretty much like in the lunchroom, all the groups of people who sit together at a table, like all the cliques or cliques or whatever you call them, they all turned out to be the same personality types. Why does this person from inventory, this person from sales, this person from accounting, and this person who's a technician, why do they always sit together at the same table in the lunchroom, on their break? It turns out, well, they're all exactly the same personality type, So that's what we found. And then all this clique over here, they were all the same personality type. They were a different personality type, but they were all the same, So it was like, wow, there was actually something in that. But what HR tried to do is they tried to say, okay, well, for this job, you need to be this personality because that's the best personality. And it turns out that didn't make any scientific sense. They tried to verify that scientifically, and it showed that it was crap. And of course it's crap. That's not what the test was designed for, So they still take personality tests. It's like a flavor of the month thing. There's always new types of tests that come in and fall from favor. I remember doing for a job, it wasn't a CEO job, but it was an executive job. I had to do psychometrics. I had to go to a place and, I took tests like all afternoon or something, and they submitted a 100-page report on the psychometrics of every kind of graph you could ever imagine. And it was all crap, it really was. I felt like I gamed it a little. That stuff is not going away. It's sort of more of it coming in, but they're coming out with different tests all the time. I can't keep track. These things are around for a year or two and then they're gone. A lot of them. So whatever. Don't fear it. If that's what they think is going to determine if you're good or not, hey, whatever, just go through it if you want the job. Val B says, question, how to handle an interview without disclosing my age? I'm not 30 anymore. Thank you so much. Or what do you leave out of your resume without being honest? Of course. Thank you. Yeah, that's tricky. I mean, listen, if these people have got it into their monkey brains that only a person of a certain age is good in this job, I don't know if you really want to work there. The one thing that the approach that I would take for like the ageism thing, just in general, is if you're worried about being too young or you're worried about being too old, go interview with someone who's the same age as you. Like a 60-year-old who's interviewing you is not going to have a problem with you being 60. They're not going to say like, oh, you're 60, so you can't do crap, You know what I mean? Like, or a 21-year-old is not going to say, well, I'm sorry, we'd like to hire you, but you're 21. And as we all know, 21s can't do anything. So I'm sorry, you're not good enough. You know what I mean? So my point is interview with places where the person deciding is the same age as you as much as possible. It is possible to do that, especially if you're doing networking, you're reaching out, you can see the individual you're reaching out to. You decide, in this organization, who am I going to reach out to? Am I going to reach out to this person who looks like they're 200 years old, or am I going to reach out to this person who looks like they're 30? You know what I mean? So that's how I would do it. Now, as for your specific question, the only thing I think that's sort of common is you put 5 to 10 years maybe of work experience and that's it. You don't put anything beyond like 5 to 10 years. Because once again, another fallacy, another thing that HR teaches is that, if you go back certainly 10 years, nobody cares what you did like 10 years ago and earlier. Of recruiters, nobody cares. Like in reality, if they're hiring you for a real job, of course they care. They care about your entire career, but recruiters have decided, okay, if it's 5 years to 10 years, we don't care about that. Some people draw the line at 5 years, other people draw the line at 10 years, but somewhere in there, there's kind of a cutoff where they figure, okay, none of this counts, right? You got to love that, right? It's very condescending. Nothing you did before this year counts. They also believe in if you don't use it, you lose it, which is even more insulting. Oh, sure, you have a degree in this, but if you haven't used it for more than 5 years, then it's as if you don't have it. It's like BS. My God. Okay, so you can leave that stuff out, and then if you don't disclose your age, they won't know other than going off your looks. You know what I mean? Like their impression. That's really how it works. You know, like I would just, instead of trying to bark up that tree, I would just try and go to the places that don't think like that. That would be my recommended approach. I know that's easier said than done. I know it's not as simple as it sounds, but you can do that. You can say like, oh, you know, this is an issue. Okay, well, forget it. You know, I'm going to look elsewhere. Mona says, thank you for expertise. I really appreciate your input. You are correct. I left while writing things. Is it worth putting 17 hours a day? Thank you. Yeah. At the end of the day, you gotta do something that works for you. You know what I mean? And you can't run yourself ragged. And I've worked 17-hour days before, like shift work, so I know what that feels like. A lot of people have. But like trying to sustain that, no, absolutely not. Tech Savvy says, if you applied to a job, a systems admin, and had first interview that went well, is there any harm in applying to another job, like a project manager at the same company, or should I wait outcome of systems admin? Tech Savvy, you can do whatever you want. You know, you don't have to ask permission for anyone to do anything. Okay. Now, if you don't apply, there's 0% chance you're going to get the job. Like if you're not pursuing it, right? So if you do pursue it, then there's a chance that, you know, you might get it, right? Now, in the absence of you knowing anything real about like, oh, if I apply for this second job, it will have a detrimental effect on me applying for both or applying for the first one. If you know something concrete, you have to decide on that on its own merits. But unless you know something, you know, don't just let some weird irrational fear like necessarily stop you. You know, if on the other hand, you have a history of doing this before, where you applied for one job at a place and then you applied for another job at the place, and they found out, the first bunch found out about the second application, and that killed that killed both opportunities for you. If you have a history of being in that situation, then fair enough. But in the absence of anything concrete, I wouldn't shy away from it from some irrational, intangible fear. Go for it. You know what I mean? If you can do both jobs, put yourself up for them. You know what you might want to do. Okay, here's an opportunity. What you might want to do, apply for one through standard channels, through the posted job market. The other one, maybe put yourself forward for it through networking. Okay. That'll be a good experiment for you to do some networking, where you reach out to the person involved in the second job or something, and you don't go through official channels. You talk right to the hiring manager and see if they'll consider you directly, but learn about that stuff. That's what I'd say. Hopefully that helps. Sometimes Joey Plays says, lowercase b means we're buds. Okay. Well, that's different. Fair enough then. We do the thing where we take like a drink, and you kind of link your arms in there, right? And you all drink together, right? Yeah. And then you smash the glasses. It would be hard smashing these. This is acrylic glass. It's like plastic. I suppose if you threw it really hard, I guess it would break, but that might be scary. Prime says, whenever I message recruiters or HR or anyone who is responsible for recruiting, I always reply with a general bot like a GPT. Yeah, you're going to the wrong people. You don't contact recruiters by direct outreach, because recruiters, how can I put this? There's the HR organization wants you to follow a standard procedure for hiring. They want you to come in the front door. They want you to get filtered. They want you to get assessed. And then you end up dealing with people at the very bottom. And then in the hopes that you can try and come up to maybe talk to a hiring manager or a recruiter up here, right? Okay. If you contact the hiring manager, you contact the recruiter, you contact anyone else in that process, they will want you to go through that process. They're responsible for setting up that procedure, that process, right? So they will refer you back to it. That's how that works, right? So networking, the whole point is that you go around that retarded process, okay? You don't want to be considered alongside 800 people. and put side to side with them, right? You want to get hired because you're the only one that showed up. So you either talk directly to the hiring manager, or most likely you talk to the people above the hiring manager, right? Nobody's bothering them. You're the only one that's reached out to them. And what they're going to do is, if successful, they're going to refer you downwards. So this hiring manager is going to get a message from their boss. Their boss is going to come and talk to them and say, hey, I think you should consider this person. I had a meeting with this person. They seem really good. I think you should consider them. Okay? The other reason you would do this, that's even more suited and more optimistic, is what you got to realize first is that the vast majority of jobs are not posted. Okay? It's something like only 20% of jobs or whatever that are actually posted. The other 80 are never posted, right? So where the real benefit of this lies is going after a job that isn't posted, right? Those are the good jobs, the ones that they don't need to post because they don't have any problems finding candidates for them. Everybody wants to do it, As soon as they announce it to their own employees, or, we're going to add someone to the team here, the boss is inundated with like, oh, I got a brother, I got a friend, I got a former coworker that could do this. They're good. Should I tell them to contact you? Right? Those are the good jobs. The only jobs that are posted are the ones that they can't find people for. So they have to go through the expense and the trouble of posting it publicly, getting a mountain of resumes from absolute strangers, many of which aren't qualified at all. They have to filter through. And then you don't know any of these people. I mean, they could be axe murderers. They could be, criminals. They could be insane. You really don't know. They could be people that are just, they falsified their entire resume, People that say, yeah, I totally have a medical degree. Oh yeah, and I did work at Harvard Medical Center for 10 years. Yeah, ask anyone there. They'll refer you to me. I was a professor emeritus there. People like this that they actually work at the gas station. Right? Who wants to deal with that unless you have to? That's the nature of posted jobs. I can tell you, it's expensive and it's time consuming to post a job. It means you got to sit in rounds of job interviews. And this is not your function. Your function, if you're a manager, you're a hiring manager, your function is not to like be in job interviews. That's extra work that's tacked onto your normal job, right? You don't enjoy doing it and you try and avoid it if you can. Okay, so I can't explain this whole thing in like 2 minutes, but learn all you can about the hidden job market. I've got some videos. I've got a course, right? If you really want to get into it with me. But go and learn about this, right? Learn about how this stuff works. Learn about how businesses are structured and who you should contact. I do have a free playlist. Let's see if I can pull it up. It's not everything, but it's like, it's some things, and it's free videos on my channel here. So if I share my screen, let's see here. Okay, so this is my YouTube channel, right? So here, how to tap the hidden job market. There's like a playlist. I did these 4 years ago, so don't be fooled by my youthful good looks. But check out these, okay? The videos might not be awesome. They're very cheap, and I think they shot half of them in my bedroom or something. But the information is good. But for those of you who want to go the full meal deal, check that out. Okay, there's a link in the job description. There's a link in the video description to that course. Check that out. That's where like I walk you through everything, including the hidden job market, how you get jobs, with templates and processes and all that kind of stuff. Okay, Torshia says, hi, Bill. Torshia from Trinidad and Tobago. Right on. You always give great advice. I appreciate it. Well, thank you very much. That's very gracious of you. I appreciate that. Thank you. A lot of people don't take the trouble to come back and say that, so that's really cool. Thank you. Prime says, and when I reply with, is that an automated message, they don't reply. Yeah, that's because it is, obviously. I think you know that. Tomi Zzz says, should I write an email to follow up on a job application and actually get a solid answer? How should I write? Save your time. You don't need to do that, Tomi Zzz. Listen, like you can certainly do it, but here's the thing. For the amount of benefit that's going to get you, okay, it's really not worth it. The only time I would ever recommend anyone does this, if it's like some kind of amazing dream job that you've always wanted, like 1 in a million, you want to make sure that nothing has fallen through the cracks so you can follow up to the application being submitted, right? Now, chances are you, like someone just said, you won't get an answer, okay? It's very unlikely that people will want to take the trouble to respond to an email that says, yeah, I did receive your application. It did go into the computer, right? Doing that work doesn't benefit them in any way. You know what I mean? So with suitably low expectations, I suppose you could do it for that, but that's really not something you should be doing as a general rule. Instead, put your time and your effort into pursuing more opportunities, either with posted jobs, certainly, or learning about the hidden job market. That's where stuff is. Kate45 says, I would say the companies that don't know what they want and are poor interviewers are the ones who rely on the personality tests. I think the latest is the DISC test. Yeah, well, you see, the thing is, a company is not one entity, right? It's a whole bunch of individuals. So what normally you get is a hiring manager that kind of has an idea what they want, right? But you get an HR department that either second guesses the hiring manager and says, like, look, okay, hold on. We're the ones that know hiring, okay? You stick to what you know, which is getting work done, whether you work in sales or operations. You just stick to the manufacturing and the sales. We will handle the hiring because we know all about it. We make it our business to understand hiring, right? So you just leave it to us. And then they have no idea what the actual job is. Like if it's in manufacturing operations or it's in sales, they have no idea about operations. They have no idea about sales, but they know about hiring in theory. So they believe they're going to provide you the perfect candidate, right? Meanwhile, they do a pretty damn terrible job for a variety of reasons, right? They understand labor laws and things like that, employment standards, which is great. They definitely can help the hiring manager with that kind of stuff. But in terms of selecting a person that has the right, personality or has the right skill set to do it, they're really not that great. And that was my experience in business. I found that 50% of hiring managers that were in my sort of combined company that I was in, they employed recruiting companies to help them hire. And it was simply to act as grunts, to post the job, to filter the initial candidates, but then hand it off to the hiring manager. The other 50% of hiring managers, they didn't even employ recruitment companies. We didn't have any recruiters in-house, but they didn't hire any external recruitment companies because they felt that, like, A, they didn't really do a great job anyway, and B, they could do the work themselves and it was even money whether, you got a better result or not. So that's been my experience. And I know why when I hear people's horror stories of how they're assessed, I'm not necessarily trying to hate on recruiters. There are some good recruiters out there, but it's just there's a lot of bad ones. And there's a lot of ones that overstep, Now, when you get into, I don't know if anyone cares, but when you get into executive recruitment, there are a few people that are genuine executive recruiters and they actually do a great job. For a start, they have the right attitude. They don't treat everyone like they're dirt when these people are high-powered executives. They're not, it's a great way of sending them the signal that they should leave and not consider this job by treating them like some cattle. But those decisions, when they hire executives, are not taken by recruiters. They're taken by people who are essentially former executives, executives hiring executives, because how would a recruiter know what traits you would need to be a good executive? They have no conception of doing that job at all. Not many people do, but these people certainly don't. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, my point is that they're not even allowed to be near the decision of like who to hire, at that level. And that's telling. That's telling. Recruiter is an entry-level job, and they definitely have their uses, but it's not in like assessing a person to see if you're suited to a job. That's not remotely where their strength lies. Very few people can do that to start with, let alone an entry-level employee that they're working on a budget. Anyway, I'm sort of going off on a rant and I'm not answering questions, so I should get back to this. Sorry, I'm very far behind in this. I'm going to try and hurry this up a little bit. Okay, so that was Kate45. I kind of answered and then rambled on a bit. Valby says, thank you for great advice. Well, thank you, Valby. That's very kind. Torsia says, I worked for a major company here in the Caribbean who were big on psychometric tests. When I got in 20 years prior, it wasn't done. But wow, they ended up with a lot of psychos. Yeah, I know, because it's crap. You see, these companies, they like to sell large corporations on this promise that, you'll get more workforce efficiency, right? And I haven't really seen that materialize yet. Kate45 says, I appreciate your responses so much. Thank you. The entire conversation has been, well, thank you very much, Kate. I'm flattered you think that. I've just been sort of ranting about things and hopefully it's been useful. But thank you. If anybody wants to go deeper, you want sort of my version of how to get a job, check out that course. That's where it is, okay? There's a link to it in the description, and I've made a frequently asked questions video about the course. So it's as transparent as possible about what you're getting and how it works. Okay, so if that's of any use to you, that's like my full explanation of things like the hidden job market. Just can't get into it in live streams or even in videos. I'd be there for like 2 hours. You've got to have all these principles stacked on top of each other for it to make sense. Mona says, I went straight to the job site and got an interview. Like literally, like physically, you went to the job site and got an interview? That's good. I recommend applying in person for a lot of things. So good. Prime says, thanks for the advice, but I couldn't understand what happens when the executive tells the hiring manager about us. Do we still go through the process? Okay, now this was in reference to what? When I reply as an automatic message and I don't reply. No, you don't. Like, look. What I'm recommending, it's an alternative to the standard job interview process or the standard hiring process. When I say standard hiring process, what I mean is the act of posting a job, receiving applications, having those applications go to HR, usually through some kind of ATS, applicant tracking system, usually with some kind of AI filter on it, right? Then it goes to a recruiter. Then they bring you in for job interviews, right? It's a dehumanizing process. They select a person from there and then put them in the job, right? That's the standard process. What I refer to as a standard process for hiring, okay? Networking, its main value is that it goes around that, okay? For example, recruiters don't like certain things. Some things that are like silly. Like, for example, they use years of experience as a sort of universal metric to see whether someone is good at their job or not, right? So, for example, they'll look at two candidates. This candidate has 5 years experience in this role. This other candidate has 10 years experience in this role. So the recruiter will conclude that, you've got 10 years experience in the role, you should be good at that role, right? Now, we all know that that's not necessarily true, right? But this is an example of an assumption that is made by a recruiter, right? Because that's how they're taught to think. Now, the problem with this, of course, one of the problems is that, for example, nobody would ever change careers if this was the only way they were assessed, right? Because by definition, if you change a career, you're going to a job you have 0 years experience in. So you apply for the job, the recruiter asks you, how many years of experience do you have in this role? And you say, well, 0. Their response is going to be, well, how do you think you're qualified to do this? I'm sorry. Your application is denied, right? Now that's stupid, because if that was the only way people got a job, no one would ever be able to change careers. Well, obviously people change careers every day. It's a very common thing. The reason is that they don't go through this process to change careers. Instead, they go through networking and they talk directly to the hiring manager or someone above the hiring manager, right? And that person sees that they understand the role. They see that they're very professional. They click with them on a personality level. They've got great communication skills, and they've displayed their initiative. They've demonstrated it by reaching out to them in the first place, right? So this is the alternative process. Okay, networking is the alternative process. It's not meant to complement the standard hiring process. It's meant to go around it. And usually you apply the networking process to companies that haven't even posted a job yet. They're not doing the standard process. And that's where you find a lot of amazing opportunities, because most jobs aren't posted. Now, if you don't believe me on any of this stuff, if you've never heard of this stuff, don't take my word for it. Go out and do your own research. Start with Google or ChatGPT, ask them these questions, see what the reality is. Then go and get your advice from a variety of different sources, and then go out and try things, okay? This is real. It's not meant to be some complement to the standard hiring process. It's the alternative. It's the fix for it. Okay? It's how most, people at the bottom, they probably aren't aware of this. People in the middle, some of them are aware of this, but once you're a manager, this is how you get a job. So all the higher level jobs, they all get recruited pretty much exclusively by doing this. Anytime you see a job posting for CEO of a big company, it's crap. They don't hire CEOs that way. That's just to make people feel that they're being objective when they're not. How many times have you had a new boss at a place you worked where you didn't even know that they were replacing the boss, the job was open? You found out about it after the fact. After they hire someone, they say this person is starting on Monday and they're going to be your new boss. This is why. Anyway, as I say, I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. This is just how it works. So if what I recommend is go out and corroborate this. Go out and learn about it. You don't have to look very far to see that this is how things work. Twinkle Star says, the hiring recruiter was the first one to contact me. I thought it was a scam, but I made my thorough research and fortunately it's legit. Now I passed the hire view interview and phone interview. Okay. Currently waiting for the in-person interview. Okay. I hope it works out for you, Twinkle Star. Best of luck. Amaze says, how would you recommend communicating to a recruiter that I've received an offer from another company while I'm still in the interview process with their company, which is my preferred choice? Amazed, why do you feel you have to tell them about that? That's none of their damn business. Listen, you don't have to tell them anything. Keep pursuing both opportunities in parallel. Now, if one works out and you have a signed offer and you're about to start there, then you can maybe tell the other company, if they're still in process, that you're taking the job. Or you could start at that company number one, where you've got the offer, and just let's see what company two is offering, So you start at company number one, you work there for a week. Turns out company number two offers you a way better job with way more money. You could go back to your boss at company A and say, listen, I appreciate you taking a chance on me and I enjoy working here. But the thing is, I've gotten another job offer. Okay, this was just one of the irons I had in the fire when I was looking for jobs. And they made me an offer for this much. Now, can you match it? And if they can, great. You make even more money. If they can't, then you move to company number two and make even more money than you were already doing. You don't need to tell these people about what you're doing with somebody else. It's none of their damn business. It's not going to help. You know what I mean? That's the thing. You don't know what their reaction is, but in all likelihood, it's not going to help you, like, improve your chances. The thing is, it's a risk. Like, it's a crapshoot. Sometimes it'll have that effect where they'll say, oh, well, we really want you. We don't want you to go to some other company. So here, we'll offer you more money, right? Because we really want you. Other times they'll say, oh, you got another offer? Oh, okay. Well, we're not really interested in chasing you. We don't want to have to negotiate with you again. We're interested in paying you rock bottom amount of money. So I'm sorry, if you're interviewing with other people, then, we're going to rescind our job offer, or we're going to end this here, right? You're already spoken for. So you can't predict how it's going to go. So I would say keep it simple and keep these things independent, and don't prematurely end any opportunity. Get to the point where they make you an offer and see what they have to offer. It's in your best interest to just see what that option is. That's what I would do. That's just me. But that's my reasoning behind it. Okay, we have reached the end of the chat. There are 32 people here. I just want to remind everyone, as always, that you should check out that course. Now, this is another course that's applicable to some people here. If you are not like desperate for a job and that's not your immediate concern, but you're trying to climb the ladder and you're trying to put yourself forward as a candidate for, say, more management positions, this is a course that teaches you advanced communication skills. When I moved from being a sort of frontline manager, like a supervisor, going all the way up to CEO, I had to tack on several skills over about 20 years. One of them was like people management skills. One of them was financial skills, like financial management skills. Another one was advanced communication skills. So all the advanced communication skills that I learned, what I did is I put them into that course. Okay. So if you are interested in tacking that on to your skill set and making yourself maybe a contender for some management positions, I put them all in that course for the purposes of helping you guys if you're interested in learning that stuff. It took, as I said, it took me like 20 years to learn some of this stuff, but I put it all into one course, so it's all right there. So that's what that is. There's a link in the description if you're interested in that. It's a very popular course I have. A lot of people have been buying it lately, so that's really great. But check it out. If you're in that situation, you could maybe benefit from it. On the other hand, like I've said a couple of times before, if you are looking to get hired and that's your immediate priority and you're having a lot of difficulty with this process, it's confusing, you don't know what to do, this course teaches you how to get a job in the posted job market and also how to get a job in the hidden job market if you're an introvert, okay? I'm a technical introvert. I'm not an extrovert. Doesn't mean I can't do talking and I can't do social interaction. It's just that it's an energy draining experience for me. So the beauty about the way I structure that course, what I want to do is make it accessible for introverted people. So for example, it teaches you how to get a job in the hidden job market. And I've taught this method in university. And I've had a lot of students that have done this and they've actually got hired through it. And I did have administrators tell me that they thought that it was an unrealistic goal that I had. And it's crap because, I've been in that world for many years and I've gotten my last several jobs in the hidden job market. And I built a consulting company, through the hidden job market where I got all my clients. So I taught it, and a lot of students, they all met with CEOs and things of of companies in my hometown, and they got bonus points for getting selfies with them, shaking their hand and stuff. And some of them were offered jobs. So that wasn't a point of the course to get a job. It was just to do the networking part of it. But then still, some of them got offered jobs. So if you're interested, if you're an introvert, you're interested in learning about the hidden job market, then this course was made for you. Now, the way I teach it is I teach it where you reach out to people through social networking rather than going to events and things. If you're a more extroverted person, you can do this by, going to events and, meeting people in person and all this kind of stuff. I basically advocate for a method that where you're using Google Maps and LinkedIn. And I've shown bits and pieces of that on my channel. So there's a free video in the description called How Successful People Get Jobs, where I show you my desktop and I show you what this looks like, how to do direct outreach to people in your hometown that that you'd want to talk to, and do it that way. But the full meal deal is in that course if you're interested in that. I also have this one, which is learning business. So maybe less applicable to people here, but I also talk about entrepreneurship and stuff like that. So if you're interested in learning business being the scientific study of how to make money, if you want to learn that, I have something called the $100 MBA. It's technically a course, but it's actually a program where it's self-study and you learn the same material that you would learn in a brick and mortar MBA, a Master's of Business Administration in university. But you don't want to take 2 years out of your life. You don't want to pay 5 figures for it. You just want the same knowledge. Here you have access to it for $100. So it's the best bang for the buck around. For what it's worth, I have an MBA and I've led companies. So, I know what I'm talking about. This information is in the public domain. That's the thing that gets me. University, when they charge you 5 figures to learn it, it's stupid because you could learn all the same information in the public domain for a tiny fraction of that. You can order the books on Amazon, like the textbooks. You can read them. You get the same benefit. They're the same books that are used in courses in the MBA program in places like Harvard Business School. So, same benefit, but for a fraction of the price. So if that's appealing to you, if that's kind of what you're wanting to do, it can help you get promoted in a conventional job, or it can help you with entrepreneurship type ventures. Or some people that buy it, they're interested in taking an MBA, like a real MBA at a university, but they just want to put their toe in the water first just to see if is this really for me? I don't really know what we'll be studying. So they get a preview of it. Those people have also benefited from this too. So if you fit into any of those, check those out. Links in the description box below, and I have videos that go into more detail about each course, so it's as transparent as possible. I think we got a couple more comments here. Let's see. Okay, so that was amazed, right? Twinkle Star says, should I negotiate salary even though I applied in the small town? I had 4 interviews and all of them got scared about my salary expectation. It happened all the time. How to address this? So tricky. Well, I've done several videos on salary negotiation, Twinkle Star. You should check those out. At the beginning, towards the beginning of this actual live stream, somebody asked me about salary negotiation. So I spent what I felt was about 20 minutes talking about it. Bottom line, quick version is you should negotiate, but you don't negotiate until you've gotten an offer, okay? Don't try and negotiate before they've given you an offer. Not a verbal offer, like a written offer, okay? They're offering you the job. That's the point where you start to negotiate. Every point in time before then, if they want to talk about salary, you deflect it. You don't want to talk about salary. The only reason they ask that question is to try and eliminate you because they want to see if you're asking for too much. It's not any kind of serious conversation about how much money you would need. Okay? It's simply brought up just to see if they can eliminate you because you ask for too much. Right? So don't engage with them. Watch my videos on salary negotiation. And once you get an offer, then you can negotiate. Now, you may not always be able to negotiate on salary, but there's other things you can negotiate on. You might be able to get more sick days, more vacation days, things like this. You might be able to get remote work, like whatever. There's the whole variety of things you can ask for. Okay? So check those out. It's a big topic. Kind of hard for me to sort of lay it all down right here, right now. Mona says, thank you, Bill. You must be my good luck charm. I was offered a contract with the compensation I wanted. Like just today or something, since we spoke last. Anyway, well, congratulations, Mona. That's great to hear. I'm glad that it's going well for you. Best of luck. Prime says, one friend has to go through about 10 interviews for a tech job at Ubuntu Canonical, whatever that is. Is that worth it? How do we deal with such situations? I don't know what this is. What's Ubuntu canonical? Ubuntu, isn't that like a flavor of Linux? I mean, you know. So, yeah, I would need more information about that, Prime, to comment on that. Like if you're talking about 10 interviews for a tech job, that's not uncommon. That's not outrageous or anything. You know, you usually have to apply for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of jobs in the posted job market. You then have to go through handfuls of interviews, like not just like one or two, but like at least 10 for most people, and to get one position. That's usually how that works. Depends what level you're at. If you're at like the sort of entry level, you know, you're asking minimum wage, it might not be that extreme, but certainly as you climb up a little bit, one or two levels, you're definitely in that territory. That's not unreasonable or unheard of. That's just the posted job market, and it's getting worse. You know, for the hidden job market, it's a lot better. The interviews are a lot more informal. They're a lot more pleasant. And they're like referrals, because someone invites you in. They say, I want to speak to you. Can you come in? And you say, sure. Right? That's the way that works. Then, you know, the jobs are better quality, right? And, you know, usually you get it because you click with the person you're talking to, who's usually the hiring manager. And that usually means that the role is going to go better for you because you have a boss that believes in you and you click with, you know. But in the tech industry, they have less people that do it through networking because people in the tech industry, generally speaking, have less social skills. You know, it's simply because of that. There's some people that have a fantastic combination of tech brains and people skills, and they're the ones that really clean up. Prime says Canonical is the company that writes the code for Ubuntu. Okay, I wasn't aware of that. I'm not like a Linux developer or anything. I tried Linux about 30 years ago, and like pretty much almost everybody that I knew at the time, I just kind of gave up. Too complicated. You know, trying to like learn all the code just to copy a damn file across the network. It's like, nope. I understand that it's very useful for certain applications, but not my bag. And I used to run a tech company at the time, but we just weren't into Linux. Twinkle Star says, thank you for your response about salary negotiation. Now I know when to bring up that sensitive topic. I appreciate your time, effort, and wisdom so much. Well, thank you, Twinkle Star. But like I say, go and watch my actual proper videos on that topic, okay? Because I can't really do that topic justice here. It's too big of a thing. It's like somebody said, how do computers work? You know, like, you just can't explain to somebody if they're starting from, like, no offense, if they're starting from zero. You know what I mean? Like, it's just too much to explain. And you would have to, like, go and reference things. Like, here, read this book, or here, take this course, or, you know, something like that. So it's a little bit like that, okay? So I've just done a very, very kind of superficial thing with salary here. What I recommend you do, self-servingly, is I recommend you go watch my popular videos. I think the second most popular video on my channel is how to answer the salary question. So check that out. And I've done enough. If you really want to get into it, I've got a video that's called Salary Negotiation. That's the title. And it's an hour long. And it goes into several sort of things along the way as you go down the interview process, the hiring process, you know, of when salary comes into the conversation, right? Like how to handle it. Okay. So check those out, and that should straighten you, put you on the straight path. Prime says, do you have a course on general communications or sales? No, I have these 3 courses that you see on the screen. So, I mean, the MBA course, within an MBA, there's the study of marketing. And within marketing, you find sales and you find communications in, in general. I can't remember if that I don't think it has a dedicated communications course, but a lot of communications is kind of basic, right? The sort of basic communications. I don't think you need to pay for that really, if you've ever had a job before. But this course here is more advanced communications. It has nothing to do with sales. It has a little bit to do with persuasion to make people want to work with you and want to agree to what you're proposing and things like that. I mean, that isn't the core focus of the course, but it does touch on that. But it's more advanced communication skills. It's more like if you're going for a management type job and you want to put yourself forward for that. For example, one of the things that you have to show if you're a candidate to get a management role, certainly a senior management role, is you have to be able to represent the organization well, like professionally and properly, right? So how you communicate and how you talk to everyone and your written communications, they all have to meet certain standards, right? Because you're representing the organization. That's what executives do. They're always on. They represent the organization. If an executive loses their temper and yells at employees or something, that's bad. Even just internally, because they're representing their organization. You know what I mean? Do you think anyone is going to want to work for that company when you see an executive behaving like that? Of course not. So it goes a little more than just sort of giving instructions. Communication is encompassing other things, right? So that course goes a little bit into that stuff. It's all the advanced communication stuff. I was going to sign off, but I got a big long thing here from Ash. So let's take this. Ash says, "Hi Bill, not sure if you covered this today. I just got a verbal job offer, but feel the recruiter is lowballing me. They posted the pay range, but it is very wide. I'm trying to negotiate with them for the higher end of the range, but the recruiter says we just don't start people out at that rate. Then went to say you'll need 10 years at the company for that rate. This is an executive role and I'd be an external hire. Question, why even post the range then? Just because my state legally requires it, I guess. What to do about this? I'll definitely look for your salary negotiation videos too. I just wasn't sure." Okay, there's some contradictions in here, Ash. Not on your part, but on the part of the company. First of all, if it truly is an executive role, it's a red flag for me that you're just talking to a recruiter. You know what I mean? Recruiters don't have the first damn clue about what executives do, what skills you need, what experience you need. They can't choose executives. They just can't. It's the thing that's the furthest removed from what they do. Maybe if you're an executive recruiter, you might be able to assist with that process, but you still can't choose the person. You'd have to be talking to somebody else, preferably at least an executive themselves that would be the decision maker on things like this. It might even be a committee with, multiple executives and other people like board members and things on it. Okay, so if it was a true executive job, that's what I would expect. Okay. Secondly, all the tactics they're using here are very cheap, basic tactics that you would use with worker level employees. First of all, it's a verbal offer. That means it isn't an offer. It's not real. They can say whatever they want. It doesn't matter. You could agree to everything they want. What you could do, just so you know, Ash, is you could turn around, you could agree to absolutely everything here verbally, and then sing a different song the moment that they made you a written offer and say, no, I never agreed to that low pay. No, I'm going to need this, right? Nothing you said matters. It's all verbal, right? It's all amateur, and it's not real. None of this holds any water. So listen, what I would do, my general approach to how to get hired is don't think about the end of the process. Only think about how to move to the next stage of the process. Now, for you, it seems like you're at the pre-offer stage. If you pass whatever the hell this is, then presumably it seems like the next step is for them to make you an offer in writing, right? Okay, so everything you do at this stage should be geared to you getting to that next stage where they've made you an offer, okay? Don't think about the very end of the process. Think about just getting that offer. So this is a stupid thing they're doing, okay? Having this kind of like amateur hardball kind of thing that they're trying to like lower you down to, verbally, right? So I would just say, yes, sure, whatever, somewhere in there, I'm sure it's something that I wouldn't have an issue with. Whatever you have to say, right? Yeah, it's all fine. It's all fine. Oh, I understand that. That's no problem at all. No problem at all. Yeah, I'm sure we can work it out. Just so that they give you the damn offer. If they don't ever give you a written offer, what the hell does it matter? None of this matters, okay? So get that offer, agree to whatever stupid crap this is, get the offer, then you can negotiate. Because the offer at least shows that they've decided on you and they're not playing this game with several other candidates at once. You know what I mean? Telling them, oh yeah, we're about to offer it to you. Okay, well, if you are, where's the offer? Let's get it, right? Then we have something real to discuss. And then you can actually negotiate this stuff properly because it's real, it's in writing. Okay? That's what I would say. It's just very confusing. They're treating you like a low-level worker. They're using very amateur sort of tactics to get you to lowball you. But yet it's an executive role. Presumably it's important. You know what I mean? It just doesn't add up to me, personally. I mean, maybe I don't see the whole thing. I'm sure I don't see all the details, but just what you've told me, I think there's some red flags there. Oh, there's more. I'm trying to wind this down, and there's more here. Prime says, if recruiters don't know anything about hiring an executive, then do they know anything about hiring a software engineer? Well, let me ask you something. Has a recruiter done software engineering? Do they know really what traits you would need and what makes a good software engineer better than a bad software engineer? Other than looking at like, oh, you've got this degree and you got this much years of experience. Is it really that simple? You answer me that, okay? Prime? That is the answer to your question. The answer is basically no, right? Obviously, they can tell certain things. If there's a person that doesn't have any kind of formal degree or certificate or training of any kind in software engineering, nor can they produce any examples of their work, they can see, hey, I designed this app, check it out, or anything like that. Or this company there that we've all heard of in our hometown, I designed their product for them, and here's my references. It's the owner of the company and the CEO of the company. Check them. Unless they can do that, or something. Do they know anything about software engineering? No, they don't, right? So they can tell superficial stuff. They can ask you questions and say, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And some people will say, oh, I don't see myself doing software engineering. I see myself being a lion tamer, And they go, okay, well then it doesn't seem like you're a fit for this job. So they can tell stuff like that, right? But in terms of knowing anything about software engineering, chances are they know nothing, right? But that's not their job. Their job is not to know anything about software engineering. It's to be able to tell in a general sense, in terms of personality, in terms of ambition, in terms of fit, does this person seem to check out according to our stereotype of what a software engineer should be? That's what they can do. Is the stereotype correct for everyone? No. But that's what they measure everyone to. Some of them are actually pretty talented, and they're pretty prescient. And sometimes you get people that have backgrounds in psychology that they end up working as recruiters that can bring some insights into things. They can tell if like a candidate has got a bad temper or they're going to be a nightmare to work with. They can tell that stuff, and that can be very, very important. But they're missing a huge component of it. That's where the hiring manager comes in. They, in theory, know the other half. They don't know anything about psychology or about labor laws, but they are a former developer themselves. Now they're a leader of a team of developers. They know what you need to be able to be a good developer, right? So the theory is that between these two people, you should get an okay decision. That's the theory. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. Twinkle starts talking Ash. And Ash is talking to Twinkle Star. Ash says, thanks, Bill. Just need to get that written offer. Yes. If you don't get a written offer, what the hell does any of this matter? Get the written offer. Then you have something tangible to go on. Okay, there are 32 people here. Thank you for being here. You guys are awesome. Hopefully you got something out of this today. I wish you all the luck in the world. It's Friday, TGIF. Make sure that this weekend, regardless of what situation you're in, take time to force yourself to do something fun, even if you don't feel like it. If you're kind of down in the dumps, with the job search thing, and it's really not a fun place to be, you're not alone. You're not unusual. Force yourself to do something fun to just take care of your mental health before you kick ass again on Monday and you pick up the reins and you try again. Okay. I will be here. I'll be here on Monday in the afternoon. I have a collaborative live stream with Abby from the YouTube channel Life Work Balance. She is a former recruiter, or she is a current recruiter actually. So we answer questions together. You get my perspective and her perspective at the same time. So if you want to show up for that, that might be interesting. If you have questions, you can certainly join that stream on Monday afternoon. And once again, I will try and help you out as best as I can. Take care, everyone. You guys are awesome. Have a good weekend.